Sorry, one second. Okay, Bismillah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Welcome home, everybody. Welcome back to our continued study of the content of character, which is trying to beautify not only our external but our internal, and keeping ourselves polished on the inside, not only worrying about our appearance on the outside. As the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us that it's equally important that we emphasize the refinement of our character and not only taking care of our appearances. Tonight's hadith is kind of multifaceted. It's one of those narrations that really has kind of two sides to it: how it's applied and how it's received, or how it is executed and how it's handled. Real quick, Reman, can you hear me? Can you just turn off the Spotify? I sound like I'm like on a late night. Thought for a second I'd just power through it, but thank you, Jazakallah khairan. It's like I'm either in like a hotel in New York and it's like really late, or like an elevator. Okay, so the hadith is a demonstration of really the beauty of how Islam teaches. The Prophet ﷺ, and the way the Quran was revealed, it always encompasses that there's going to be two sides to this, to any sort of conversation. For example, we've heard probably many times that it's the right of the parents upon their children that their children love, respect, and do their best in serving their parents, right? We've heard this before? Okay. There's also many narrations and even verses in the Quran where Allah addresses to those people who are in places of responsibility, including parents, that they have to engage with children in a way that's merciful. And what happens when you ignore one half of the equation is you end up experiencing imbalance that can lead to oppression or neglect. So if somebody only focuses, for example, on the rights that they have over their children, but they don't focus on the responsibilities that they have to their children, then they end up potentially committing some kind of abuse. May Allah protect us. Or if somebody focuses too much on the fact that my parents have to be merciful to me, and I'm not going to even consider or think about the fact that I have to take care of my parents and do my best with my parents, then they end up falling into the trap of neglecting their parents. So Islam always gives us, and this is something that Shaykh Abdul Nasser always taught us, if you look at any ethic in the Islamic tradition, both sides are always covered, right? And when you find like the disintegration of a relationship, what you'll usually find is that people are focusing too much on one side. So in a relationship, like in marriage, people are focusing too much on what? No, I'm being wronged, as opposed to, okay, yes, I'm being wronged, but have I also contributed to this in some way, shape, or form? Right? Yes, I don't feel like I'm being heard, but am I speaking in a way that is acceptable? Right? And so Islam tells us, the Prophet ﷺ models for us the idea of being a person that doesn't just see interactions as one-sided, but we see them as two sides of a shared coin. Because of that, this hadith is going to have kind of like a 50-50 reality. So let's get to the narration itself. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ, he said, "Inna ahabba ibadillahi ilallahi ansahhum li ibadihi." That verily, the most beloved of all of the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Allah, out of everybody, are the ones who are most sincere, and some translations like most sincere in their advice to the other servants, to those who are around them. The beginning part of the hadith, that verily the most beloved of the servants of Allah, is always a very interesting preface, because when you hear that preface, when you hear that the most beloved of Allah's servants, your mind typically goes to the actions or the deeds that are more like explicitly religious, ta'abbudi in nature. So you're thinking about the person who prays qiyam all night. You're thinking about the person who donates all of their wealth. You're thinking about the person who fasts, every Monday and Thursday, right? Or they pray tahajjud. Yes, those are beloved deeds to Allah. But when you go and look at the entire corpus of hadith literature, what you'll find is that those personal worship actions that we all have, prayer, zakat, fasting, those are deeds that are beloved to Allah, but you'll find that this preface, this wording that says the most beloved to Allah, typically has to do with a person that succeeds in their interactions with other people. Another example of this narration, the most beloved of people to Allah are those that are most beneficial to others. Do you see how it's always framed that if you want to be beloved to Allah, you can't be selfish? Spirituality can be selfish, by the way. It's possible. I'm only going to take care of myself. I'm going to pray my prayers. I'm going to fast my Ramadan. I'm going to do my Hajj. And I'm going to, I'll give my zakat as I have to, but I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm not going to do more than that. And it's possible that a person can enter paradise thinking like this, but this is not the method and the model that the Prophet ﷺ wanted. There's actually a story where a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "What do I have to do to enter Jannah?" Very straightforward, very mathematical. Just thinking about the math, okay? What do I have to do to enter Jannah? Just tell me. The Prophet ﷺ told him, okay, 5 pillars. He laid it out. You have to testify that there's nothing worthy of worship besides Allah and that I'm the messenger of Allah, okay? You have to pray your salah, okay? You have to give your zakah, okay? You have to fast, okay? You have to do hajj, all right. He said, if I do these 5 things and I maintain them, will I go to heaven? Will I go to Jannah? The Prophet ﷺ said yes. Now, this conversation is happening around all these companions who do way more than that, like way more than that. And so when they see that this man is getting a list of 5 things, a checklist of 5 things that he has to do, and the Prophet ﷺ says, yes, you will go to Jannah if you do it. He then says, this is crazy. He says to the Prophet, I will do exactly these 5, and I promise you I will not do a single thing more. All right? He's got that, very frugal energy. All right? I'm not going to do a single thing more. And subhanAllah, he leaves. And the companions are like in between confused, and some are a little upset, and some are like wondering like what kind of person says that? So the companions, they asked, some of the, Ya Rasulullah, like when it comes to us, we're praying extra, we're giving extra, you're teaching us to do all these things. And the list you gave that guy was very short, but the list that we have is very long. And he said, it's true that if he is able to maintain his faith, doing those 5 things, he will enter paradise. But he said, the big question is if he is able to. And so when you look at the narration, the scholars, they comment on this and they say, what did the Prophet mean by if he's able to? Because that's a little bit vague, right? And the commentary says, doing the bare minimum, you will always eventually at some point or another fall short. If you do the bare minimum, you'll always fall short at some point or another. If you're running late for your flights, you're eventually going to miss one, right? If you always are delayed or late, you're eventually going to miss out on something. The only way that a person is able to guarantee and ensure that they will be safe, no matter what scenario, is by giving themselves a little bit of cushion, buffering, right? I mean, I know we make fun of our parents' generation for going to the airport 8 hours early. But when you miss a flight, you're like, you know what? Honestly, it's a lot less hassle sitting in an airport for a long time than it is trying to rebook, right, during busy travel. Like, subhanAllah, there's some wisdom in giving yourself that buffer. So what is the buffer of Islam? The buffer of Islam is doing things not because you have to, but because you know it's what's best for you. So when we engage with people, we have to have that ethic, that belief. I'm not going to treat people the bare minimum. I'm not going to treat people the way that they treat me. That's a Western ethic. The Western character is do unto others as they do to you. That can get really bad really fast. Because if somebody doesn't do something for you, then you're like, okay, I don't have to care about you. You don't care for me, I don't care for you. The prophetic ethic, the Muhammadan ethic, ﷺ, is what? Do good to others because that's what Allah wants you to do. Because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to do. And maybe, just maybe, Allah is testing your ability to do good to others because He knows that you have the ability and that person does not yet possess that ability. And so this narration, the Prophet ﷺ is really emphasizing. He's saying that if you want to be the most beloved to Allah, then you need to think about and be sincere in your counsel. So the topic of tonight is not just interaction and relationship, it's how do I engage? How do I talk to? How do I try to rectify the people around me, my family, my friends? Because part of the reality of being around people is that you will witness mistakes. It's kind of interesting, right? Like when we see someone make a mistake, we act as if we've never seen a mistake before. We respond in a way, and maybe it's because of like our own self, our own inconsistencies in our own self, but we see someone make a mistake and there's very little empathy. Usually it's like, oh God. But the reality is like you and I have also committed mistakes as well. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he gives us this really important belief so that we have a goal that we try to attain. Now, the Quran talks about the importance of being united and integrated in your character, in your care for each other. You can only accomplish this idea of being sincere for someone in advising them and taking care of them if you care for them. That's rule number one. The reason why the Prophet ﷺ was so good at this was because he actually truly loved people. It's impossible to advise someone lovingly if there's no love in that relationship to begin with. You can't manufacture love. You can't fake it. There's no way. And so Allah Ta'ala, in the Quran, he addresses this topic. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Before he talks about, right? So the verse says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخْوَيْكُمْ. The command in this verse, let's read the translation. The believers are a brotherhood and a sisterhood, so rectify and make right the things between your brothers and sisters. Notice how Allah does not start by saying, fix things because you're a brotherhood. He says what? You are a brotherhood and a sisterhood, which means you have to have this belief that we are here for each other. If we're not here for each other, I'm not going to be convinced enough to help you. So Allah establishes that first. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. And one of the scholars in tafsir, actually, many of them, they refer to this word ikhwa because Allah Ta'ala chose a word in specific that factually we could argue is not true, but spiritually is. What's the factual reality? Is that brothers and sisters were not actually related, but the word ikhwa actually in Arabic means blood relative. Blood relative, like a brotherhood. Okay? But we're not blood related. We all come from different families and lineages and tribes and whatnot, right? We come from different places. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose the word that indicates blood relation in a concept that's not blood relative, that's not blood related? Because, as Imam Shafi'i said to his student who he got into a fight with, remember that our faith is stronger than our blood. The iman that we have between us, it actually is thicker, as they say in English, thicker than blood. It keeps us together. It bonds us together. So when somebody is a Muslim, it's interesting. You can have family members that are not Muslim that have less right over you than a stranger who is Muslim. Right? Like there are certain rights, familial, but when it comes to someone who is Muslim, they actually have certain rights over you that a person who's not Muslim does not have. So your faith is actually a tighter bond. And that's why Allah uses this word. And the command there is to reconcile. By the way, this chapter doesn't just talk about like petty disagreements. People that argue about, this or that, paper or plastic, green or blue, should we fly or drive? No, these are all like petty. This is actually talking about combat. Because Allah Ta'ala, He mentions later, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اخْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيءَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. Translation is summarized, when you notice that there's two groups fighting, then your job is to make them stop fighting. And if one of them is being more aggressive than the other, then you need to defend the victim and push back against the aggressor until everything is back to normal. So we're talking here about two groups of Muslims that are actually physically engaged in combat. It's not fun. It's not a happy topic. But the Quran deals with reality. You're going to have families, you're going to have friends, you're going to have communities that are going to fight. And some people say, oh, this is, we're all Muslim here. Why are we fighting? Well, it's true, but Islam never tells us that because you're Muslim, you can't fight, because that's not a human expectation to have. Islam says, because you're human, you're going to fight. And because you're Muslim, you should know better. And you should learn how to stop it, right? It doesn't say don't fight. It says your Islam teaches you to stop it. Not that you can ever avoid it, right? Same with anger. You're human. You're going to get angry. Islam tells you, control your anger. Relax. It's okay. Get up, make wudu, go pray. Take a walk, right? 10,000 steps is good for you. Okay. Another verse, subhanAllah. Allah Ta'ala says, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. It says, remind. This is a command. Remind. Be a person that reminds. And this is one of my favorite verbs in the Islamic corpus because we hate being reminded. Like literally every human being despises when somebody tells them things that they already know. And people respond, I know. You don't have to tell me. Right? You don't have to remind me. I'm already doing it. It's one of those things we find it to be disrespectful. But Allah actually says that built into your daily life is going to be reminders. And here's the part that's scary. This ayah is actually not talking only to the reminder, it's talking to the receiver of the reminder. Allah says, remind, وَذَكِّرْ فَذَكِّرْ. And then He says, فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى, because reminders تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, benefit the believers. So if someone's reminding you and you find yourself not being benefited by that, you're irritated by it, it's bothering you, then what does that say about my belief? If every time someone gives me a reminder, I get angry, then I'm actually very, unfortunately, removing myself from this group of people known as the believers. Because Allah said that true believers actually find benefit in every reminder. Listen to this statement of Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Ghazali, he said something very profound. You know, in logic, there's a thing that we call an ad hominem. Ad hominem is when instead of attacking a person's idea, you attack them. So someone says something, and instead of addressing what they're saying, you attack them. So they say, hey, you know what, you should really, you should be more careful. And you say, well, you're lazy. What does that have to do about being careful? It has nothing. It's actually one of the logical fallacies in argumentation. If someone does this, it proves that they're not really engaging on an intelligent level, okay? Imam al-Ghazali, he said, and by the way, they would do this against the Prophet ﷺ. All the Quraysh, when the Prophet ﷺ said, worship Allah, they would say, you don't know what you're talking about. They wouldn't be able to address the argument at hand. Imam Ghazali said, I would be okay having an alcoholic whose breath smelled like alcohol remind me, don't drink, please. Don't drink. What would we say if somebody who was immersed in something came and advised us not to do the very thing that they were immersed in? We would say, what? Look at you. You're not really like the shining example. You're not the paragon of good character. Who are you to tell me anything? Look at what Imam Ghazali's heart and his mind did. Instead of making it about the nafs, Imam Ghazali said, maybe, just maybe, the alcoholic actually knows something, and although they're struggling, their position of advice is actually way more sincere. And so he said, I would never discount the advice of a person because of who they are. I will listen to the advice of somebody, no matter who they are. I will not block them because I want to push them away. No, I'm going to listen to them. That's the sign of a believer. A believer will always listen. Always. There was one time, Imam Malik, he walked into the masjid, Masjid Nabawi, where he was living in Medina, he was teaching. And I want you to imagine, like, if you're like a parent or if you work somewhere, some position where you are the authority. I want you to imagine that. You're the authority. And you walk into a space and someone who, for some reason, doesn't know exactly who you are, they feel very energetic and aggressive and they tell you something. So let's say you're the boss. You walk in somewhere and the person tells you, hey, get to work. You're like, excuse me? Imagine being like, I'm coming home. My daughter did this today actually to me, which is fine. I walked in the house and I told her to wash her hands. That's the whole thing after school because, this is, you'll know when you have kids why. But so I told her, wash her hands, get changed, I'll have your snack or whatever. And then I'm preparing her stuff. And I wash my hands too, but she didn't see me wash my hands. So then as I'm like getting her snack ready and my son's snack ready, they come down and then, my son is, mashallah, he cleaned his plate in like 3 seconds. But my daughter is like eating like a small bird. So she has a lot of leftovers. So I took one of her, the crackers I put for her. She goes, hey, you didn't wash your hands. I was like, first of all, I did. I had to take her to the sink and show her. Like I lifted, I was like, look, it's wet. I was like, second of all, who are you talking to, right? So a lot of times when someone we feel like is not at our level, we're like, don't you dare talk to me like that. I don't care what you're saying. Don't you dare talk to Imam Malik, rahimahullah. He walked into the masjid and he sat down. And the reason why he sat down is because it was the time of Asr and Maghrib. It was between Asr and Maghrib, which we know there's no sunnah, right? In a lot of the majority of the madhahib, of the legal schools, there's no sunnah after Asr, right? Until Maghrib. Okay, even the extra sunnah, like when you walk into the masjid and you pray 2 rak'ah for the masjid, Tahit al-Masjid, right? So he walked in, and it's his opinion that there's no prayer in between Asr and Maghrib, even Tahit al-Masjid. When you walk in, you don't pray anything. You just walk in, you sit, and you make dua, make dhikr. But he walked in, and there was a young person, like a young student, imagine like a teenager, hey, pray 2 rak'ah. Just told him. And he's Imam Malik. I want you to understand, he's the smartest individual by far in the city at the time, if not potentially like the world, when it comes to Islam and legal rulings. And he stood up and prayed. Against his own ruling, against his own madhab, his own belief. He stood up and prayed. So then his students were like, because obviously they're going to get aggressive. Look at this teenage kid telling Imam Malik to stand up and pray. So after he prayed, his students went to him and said, Shaykh, like, did you change your opinion? What happened? He said, no. He said, I did not want to be from amongst the people. Listen to this. Allah talked about in the Quran those people that when they were told to pray, they didn't pray. You see that? That's a sincere heart. He's like, I almost forgot like what time it was, and I just heard someone tell me stand and pray, and I stood and prayed. Because I didn't ever want to be like susceptible to being the individual that was told, like the Quran says, when they were told to pray, they didn't pray. Talking about those people of Jahannam. May Allah protect us. So look at the humility, how it transforms the recipient of advice. Receiving advice is about the humility of the receiver, the heart. It's not about their credentials. It's not about their accolades. It's not about their position or title. It's about their heart. What type of person? You would take advice from a child. You would consider the advice from a child if your heart was in the right place, right? But likewise, you would ignore the advice from an expert if your heart was sealed off. It's not about the person. It's about the heart of the individual. Allah Ta'ala, He actually even mentions, and part of the reason why it's important to take advice is because the giver of advice, if they're sincere, inshallah, we'll talk about that. The giver of advice is actually, they have to be very courageous. Like, it's not easy to give advice. I know some people are, we're thinking about the people that are pathological advice givers. Take those people and just push them to the side for a second. Think about how difficult, if you ever had to tell someone that you loved something that they did that was not right, or you wanted to advise them. Think about how long it took you. Think about how many times in your head you went over the scenario. You played out all the potential, what's going to happen, what could happen. You crafted your message. You thought about your words. Maybe you sought advice from someone else on how to give advice to this person. Think about how many times. It takes a lot of courage to go and stand up and do the right thing. To say that to someone that's your friend that you love, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He is advising or when He is talking to Sayyidina Musa and his brother Harun, alayhi salam, He tells them, قَالَ لَا تَخَافَ, don't be afraid. إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمْ أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى. Don't be afraid. Because they have to go and advise, not just anybody, they have to advise the oppressive civilizational power of the time, Fir'aun. And when you go, if you ever go to Egypt, I know I talked about this in February, when you go there and you see the civilization that they built and the power that they commanded, you could see why Musa was nervous. You could see why he was scared, because it's him alone, and then he goes, oh Allah, just give me somebody, my brother, please. So it's him with his brother going up now to this massive, massive structure, this civilization, this powerful, oppressive, slave-driving individual who can crush him, and he has to go and tell him what? Worship Allah. You're doing the wrong thing. You're doing the wrong thing, right? So that courage, Allah rewarded by saying what? Innani ma'akum. Whenever you give advice, I'll be with you. I'll be with you. Asma'u wa ara. I know what you're going to say, and I'm watching. Don't worry. You don't got to be afraid. Okay, so what does that mean when you're receiving advice then? Well, when someone builds up the courage to sincerely come to you and tell you something, and you push them away, you're not only pushing them away, who are you pushing? If Allah is with them, who are you rejecting? Because it took them a long time to gain the courage to come and talk to you. And Allah is saying, Innani ma'akum, I am with you, meaning to the advisors here. So when we push people away, we don't know that we may be inadvertently be pushing away the blessing of Allah Ta'ala as well. Allah has sent that person to us to help us, to guide us, to put us back on the right path. This is assuming, again, the advisor is sincere. We'll talk about that a little bit. But when you're receiving advice, don't be a person that rejects, because you may inadvertently be rejecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that as well. Some other narrations that help us think about advice and why we should consider this. Because some of us are shy. Some of us don't want to advise. We prefer the avoiding, right? I don't want to deal with it, which in some scenarios can be true. Maybe you're not the right person. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe this is not the right opportunity, right? So it doesn't have to be done tonight. You know, it's cold outside, right? You go find someone, they're not wearing a jacket. You're like, hey, hold on. I got to advise you. They're cold. Like, just give it a break. You can, meet them indoors. Like, there's some scenarios. Or you may not be the right person. Like, maybe you saw something, but you know that your relationship with that person is not great. So you have to think critically, okay, I know what they did was not right, but if I go to them based on our relationship, or we don't have a relationship, maybe I don't know them, they don't know me, but maybe I can try to advise around them, and then those people can help, and there's actually a chance of that working. So why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man dalla ala khayrin falahu mithlu ajri fa'ilihi." That for the person who helps guide somebody to something that's good for them, it's better for them, then not only does that person who's doing that better, who changes their life, not only do they get the reward, but you also get the reward as well. You get the reward because you taught them, you guided them, you steered them, right? You indicated to them which way to go. However, we also learn from the same person, the Prophet ﷺ, that there is a protocol, there is a method on how to advise. And we're going to go over that next. But the general principle is from his words, peace be upon him. He said, "Man satara musliman, satarahu Allahu fid dunya wal akhirah." That whoever prioritizes concealing, here concealing means the faults of their fellow Muslim, then the reward of that is that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will conceal them, not only in the akhirah, but in this life as well. So this idea of exposing somebody, okay, pause for a second. I know everyone's thinking about, well, what if someone is a predator, someone is this? Okay, exception, put it over here. Okay, baseline. Okay, yes, there are criminals. And yes, we don't hide crime, right? If someone here came and stole someone's laptop, like, hey, it's like, shh, conceal his fault. Let him get away, right? No. Right? If someone commits a crime, right, there is legal recourse. But we're talking here about faults, number one, that are like mostly self-contained, that are internal faults, okay? Number two is that faults that don't have criminal consequences to them. Okay, they may be moral indiscretions, things that maybe can be fixed or alleviated without needing to seek any sort of legal ramifications, okay? But the lesson in this hadith is that true advice, true nasiha, it protects the dignity of the one getting the advice. You have to think first and foremost about the dignity of that person. So let's talk a little bit about how we can receive advice and give advice sincerely. First, let's talk about giving advice. Number one, whenever you find in your heart this idea of giving advice and wanting to advise somebody because you want to help them, you love them, you care for them, the first question is this for Allah, or am I trying to prove something? Am I trying to make a statement? Am I really motivated to do this publicly because I want people to see this? Am I trying to humiliate this person? What am I trying to accomplish here? And that question alone can usually filter out fairly quickly, what I'm trying to do. Okay? So the first step is what? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? If I'm doing this because I want this person to feel bad or low about themselves, then that's not the right time, and you should in fact not say anything. You should not say anything. Imam An-Nawawi, great scholar, he once said that if as a result of you giving advice, this person actually starts to hate you, he said usually that's an indication that you didn't actually intend the right thing. usually. Right? So we ask Allah to give us pure intention. Am I doing this for Allah or to prove something? Number 2, choose the right place and time. It's all about time and place. Many people, this is, by the way, in life, like for a lot of things. When you have conversations with somebody, you could actually ruin a really good chance or opportunity by simply not thinking about the right time and place for that conversation. You can. It's possible. Like, this person may be open to what you're saying, but because you rushed it or because you delayed, right? Maybe you missed that window. Or maybe you're not the right person. So Sufyan al-Thawri is a great scholar. He said that part of what should be like your thought process as you choose time and place is that you should oftentimes, or almost every time, lean towards privacy. Don't do something immediately because you feel the urgency to correct them, even if it's for the sake of Allah, but rather you can make a note of it. You can, write it down. You can do whatever you got to do. And then later engage with them in a way that is private. Why? Because it preserves their dignity. The first thing that a person will think about when they're being corrected and they notice that others are watching is they won't even notice the correction or the advice. They'll just think about the heat and the gaze of others. I know we're thinking all about like adult to adult right now, but this is a great advice for parents as well. When parents try to give their kids tarbiyah and they do it in public, kids typically don't even know what you're saying. They're not processing it. All they're processing is that this is embarrassing. And a lot of us maybe perhaps are triggered because this was like the story of our lives. My autobiography, right? This is embarrassing. AbdelRahman's memoirs. So think about how when you were corrected in public, even as a child, by anybody, think about a teacher in a school maybe that did it the wrong way, or a coach that maybe made you feel low in front of your teammates. That's why it's not prophetic. But the one who actually has care for you will be patient and will take the time to do it in private. Now, yes, there may be some instances exceptionally where advising in an environment where other people are could have some benefit. If a person is like habitually, there's a pattern of behavior and private advice has not worked, and maybe their behavior is encouraging others now, right? Then sometimes you say, look, this is not right. You can't keep doing this, okay? But still, there are guardrails, and we'll talk about those guardrails as we keep going. One of those guardrails is that you begin by actually stating your care for this person. You state your affirmation. You say, I actually care for you. Because again, people get defensive. The first thing they're going to think is, why do you hate me? You actually have to say it. I care for you. The Prophet ﷺ, he taught us, if you love your brother, then tell him. If you love your brother, tell him that. Why? I mean, for those of us, he knows I love him. He knows I love him. No, that's not how this goes. If you love your brother, if you love your sister, then make sure that they know. Tell them with words. So you begin your advice giving by saying, hey, look, I actually love you. I care for you. And that's the only reason why I'm doing this really uncomfortable thing right now, because I actually care for you. If I didn't care for you, I actually wouldn't even bother, because I would just let you be. I would just let you do your thing and maybe make a mistake over and over again. I'm only doing this because I want to see you happy. I want to see you do better. I want to see you not in so much stress, right? When you begin like that, now the person, all of the guards start to go down. I feel like I'm doing marriage counseling right now. All of the guards start to go down, okay? You say things like, I want the best for you. I care for you, okay? The Prophet ﷺ, he says, be gentle. Be gentle. You don't have to say everything explicitly. This thing, man, is so dangerous, subhanAllah, because you know why? This device is so helpful, but it gives you this digital courage that's so dangerous. You would say things on here that you would never say with your lips to somebody. If you had to look someone in the eyes and say something, if you have to give advice over your phone, please FaceTime, don't text. I'm serious, because people say things over text message because it doesn't register. Like, there's a certain body language that Allah programmed us with where we can tell. If you've ever seen someone be insulted and seen their face shrink and their entire self-esteem just disappear, then you would never want to make someone feel that way. And this thing it opens that door way too easily. Because you're just typing, hit send. And even now there's undo, right? Which is a little shady. What did you write? I don't want to tell you, right? Then they go to their iPad that hasn't been updated, right? And they find it. You can tell, I heard from my friend, never happened to me. So, be gentle. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَا كَانَ الرِّفْقُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ. He said, there's not a single thing on earth where gentleness is present in it, except it makes it better. It makes it better. And this is tough. This is tough, right? Because part of when you are, especially if you're advising about something that affected you, and you're trying to rectify an injustice or something that was wrong, it's not just about the person, it's about also getting your justice. But when you give advice about yourself, you have to separate yourself from the advice. You actually have to do that. It's not about my justice right now. It's about the action that led to this. And I want to first talk about that. Once we agree on that, now we can talk about how I feel. Right? It's not about this yet. Don't try to mush them together. You have to deal with them separately. And the reason why it works is because this one is focusing on gentleness and this one is focusing on vulnerability. Once the person agrees that I made a mistake, then you can say, now that you agree that the mistake was made, can you see how it hurt me? Can you understand how that really made me feel? But if you go there and say, you made a mistake, look at how you made me feel. Right? The person say, it's always about you. You don't once think about me, right? And I'm triggering everybody. We're like, oh, this sounds familiar, right? So important to make sure that we separate the two. Gentleness is the separation. That's what gives us that ability to separate. Next is the Prophet ﷺ taught us to be there in the service of your brother or sister. So what does that mean? To ask how you can help. Don't just give advice and say, go do it. No. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, that there is not a single person that is in the aid of their brother or sister except that Allah is in their aid. So how can I help you? How can I help you? Can I do something differently? Is there something that I can, do you need me to like maybe give you a warning when you're feeling this way? How can I help you? Okay? I want to be there for you. Offer your support. And the last one is to make dua for them afterwards. There was a young man that came to the Prophet ﷺ and sought his permission to have an illegitimate relationship with a woman. And it's really interesting because if you think about it, like, there's so many layers to this story. The young man walks up to the Prophet ﷺ and he asks him, there's a girl that I really like. Can you please give me permission to commit zina? That's basically that was actually the function of the conversation. I want you to imagine a couple things. Number one, how good of an advisor must he have been, sallallahu that young guy came up to him. Like, that to me is the most shocking part of the story. He must have been so good. This person must have felt like, you know what? Look, because he knows that zina is haram. That's why he's asking for that fatwa. But he's like, I know that the Prophet sallallahu is not going to make me feel bad. And even if he says no, he's going to say it in a way that's like prophetic. And that's what he did. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, let me ask you a question. The young man said, sure. He said, do you have any women in your family? Mother, sister, etc. He goes, yeah. He goes, okay. Let me ask you, how would you feel if another guy in the city fell in love with your sister, mom, whoever, came and asked me the same question about them? And the guy said, I would hate it. And he goes, okay. So then what do you think, how should you feel about this request about someone else's sister, mother, etc.? Is that not fair? How do you think she feels about it, right? Why are you not thinking about these things? And he taught him, again, emotionally intelligent. He taught him, don't only think about your desires, think about what? This is good advice. And then the last step, and this is typically skipped over when people tell the story, he placed his hand on his chest. The Prophet ﷺ actually took his hand and placed it on his chest. Oh Allah, purify his heart. Oh Allah, purify his heart. He said it 3 times. Oh Allah, purify his heart. That young man, as he's narrating the hadith, he said, when I went to the Prophet ﷺ and I was walking up to him, in my heart, there was nothing that I wanted more than permission for that act. He said, when I left him, when I walked away from him after getting my answer, there was nothing I hated more than that same act. Transformation. Like good advice can actually change the person. along with the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. So these steps are essential, okay? Now, let's change ourselves. Let's flip positions. We're going to be giving advice. That's great. But now, how about when we receive advice? Because many people are good at giving, but they're really bad at receiving. So there's an art. Number one, immediately, you have to silence your ego. Immediately. You have to silence your ego. You have to enter into like a place where anything is possible. So no matter what the person is telling you, you cannot. You can see, by the way, when people are talking to each other and one of them is advising, as soon as they stop making eye contact and the person receiving advice is looking kind of like off into space, they're not listening. They're formulating, right? They're building their counterattack instead of actually maintaining connection and listening. So number one is you have to silence the nafs. Why? The nafs hates being corrected, hates it. The nafs hates being told what's wrong. That's why even in arguments, you'll be arguing with somebody, and even in the middle of that argument, that person may know, or you may find out, oh man, I'm wrong. Like you feel that internally. You're like, I'm wrong. They're right. Right? It's like you're playing chess. Like, oh man, they're going to checkmate me. I see it. There's 3 moves. And even then, you still, no, I'm going down guns blazing. Not going down without a fight. Right? The nafs, that's the nafs. So number one, silence that. Just get rid of it. The person might say, you know what? You're really not nice. You're really unfair. You're really this. And you know what you say? Say, oh, okay. I'm listening. I actually find that helps me when I say I'm listening. Because I'm actually, it's kind of petty. I'm not agreeing, but I'm listening, all right? So I'm listening. Okay, I'm listening, right? Because I'm trying to process. I'm trying to really like hear this person. Number 2, assume the best of intentions on behalf of that person. Assume the best intent. Don't assume that they're trying to hurt you, they're being evil. Assume the best intention, right? Even an imperfect delivery can be true. They say that even a broken clock is right twice a day. So even someone whose delivery is imperfect can be true. Can be true. So don't look at the delivery and say, you know, what you're saying is right, but I wish you were just a little bit softer. You actually might be right. You could be right. You know what? I wish you were a little bit gentler. Okay. But by focusing on that, you're just kind of engaging in like a surface level interaction. Graduate a little bit to the level of actually trying to see what's being said. Right? Graduate a little bit to try to see what's being said. Think about the actual substance of the conversation, not the words that are being used, but what's happening. Right? This is actually, whenever I deal with families or couples, whoever, this is the key of reconciliation. When the person stops listening to the words and they start listening to the message. It's not about, right? It's not about, one time there was a couple that was arguing about punctuality. You know, when it comes to his things, he's always on time. When it comes to my things, he's always late, da-da-da-da. He goes, I'm not late. How long? You said 6:30. I was ready at 6:30, blah, 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 whatever. And then I basically interrupted. I said, hey, I don't think she actually cares about the time. I think she just thinks that you don't care about her life. Like you prioritize your things, you don't prioritize her. That's what I'm hearing. And she looked at me, she's like, thank you. Then I looked at her and I was like, say that next time, right? I'm like, this guy, you're making him play Clue over here. It was the candlestick in the living room. Like, just say what you're feeling. So a lot of times we hide our message with words because we don't want to admit that we're hurt, right? We don't want to say you hurt me because it feels what? Like a little bit immature. But instead of trying to be like, oh, you know what? If you were just a little bit earlier, you took it this, their car's not, you didn't vacuum this. Just say, I feel like you don't honor. I feel like you don't actually care. That's what matters, right? So, but that only works if the recipient is believing that the person means well. This third one's tough. This is my biggest struggle. Don't interrupt. Listen completely. And a good way to do this is to just be quiet. And you can ask if you feel like the person is kind of like, you know, maybe they're sort of in circles. You can ask them, okay, you don't have to say it in a rude way, but you can say, are you finished? But I wouldn't say it that way. You can say, I think I understand what you're saying. Right? I think I understand what you're saying. Okay? The fourth step to being a good advisee, ask questions. Don't try to justify yourself. Ask questions. Person says something, you say, okay, what would you advise? How can I improve? How can I get better? This is actually a very interesting tactical step because it actually makes sure that the advisor truly does care for you. Because remember, part of good advice is that you have to love the person. So when you say, okay, I'm hearing you, I can see where you're coming from. Do you recommend anything? How can I improve? Now the person actually has to be like, if they're like, no, I don't know, like, okay, well, why were you telling me this in the first place then? Right? But if they love you, they'll say, you know what? Yes, there are some things you can do. Right? This. The last is to thank the person, and as you leave, to reflect privately over the advice that was given. Thank them, even if you didn't agree. Because you know what? You don't have to take 100% of what somebody tells you. It's true. It's not binding. Allah's not going to ask you, did you listen to 100%? But I challenge us to find a situation where there's not even 5% benefit in something someone told us. 5%, right? Maybe yes. And by the way, there's usually much more. But usually, when a person advises you and you feel like, man, you actually don't know what you're saying, you're way off base, there's always something in there that's good. Something. And make it your mission, your job to try to identify and find what it is that is good. Reflect privately and make dua to Allah. Oh Allah, show me the truth of what they said and help me follow it. Show me the truth of what they said and help me follow it. So this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it teaches us, in summary, the really important concept of how every relationship, number one, has to allow for advice to be given. Okay? Number two, the advice has protocol. There's a method. You can't just take all these ingredients for food and then put them in a blender and drink it. It's not going to be the same. Imagine a biryani smoothie. Like, it's just not the same, right? Ew, right? So all of these methods are the presentation of the ingredients in the right way. You need to make sure that you present it in the proper way. If you do it in the wrong way, you're taking this beautiful food and you're ruining it, okay? And then the last thing, and this is kind of like the advanced level, is that he began by saying, Inna ahabba ibadillahi ilallah, the most beloved of Allah's servants to Allah. This means that if you want to be beloved to Allah, you're not only going to be the one that is sincere in advising and receiving, but you'll actually get to a point, may Allah give us this, where you begin to seek out advice. So it's no longer just waiting for it or like letting someone advise you. Now, you're like, I want to be beloved to Allah. I want to be beloved to Allah. So part of that is I'm going to sincerely ask my friends, hey, do you have any advice for me? Do you have anything that you can tell me? My friends and I, we do this usually like once a year. We have a small group of people and we get together and we get some food and we sit and we'll actually ask each other. It's very difficult. It was in the beginning. Now it's kind of a little more normal. We'll actually ask each other like, hey, can you advise me? And the advice, subhanAllah, like you might guess what it is, but their observations sometimes are like, I don't want to say shocking because that's like a bad connotation, but like very insightful. Very insightful. One time I saw one of my friends advise another friend about, like, this guy's great. They're both great people, by the way. But he said, look, I just think that sometimes the way you talk to your kids is too harsh. And that guy, subhanAllah, the guy who received it said, I've been thinking about this for like months. And he said, I actually admire how you talk to your kids. Like, I wish I could do that. Isn't that crazy? I saw this happen and I was like, wow. Because you would expect, but again, that's a very close circle, right? I wouldn't go up to a random person at Trader Joe's and be like, hey, I saw that. I'm going to call CPS. No. This is a close friends, like we're people that love each other. And so like he said that, and the fact that that guy said, I've actually been thinking about this. Like I actually want to work on this. And I'm sort of relieved that you brought it up, because imagine now he has to go to that guy and say, can you teach me how to talk to my kids? It's kind of embarrassing, right? But subhanAllah, because he was ready and willing, and because this guy was courageous, Allah Ta'ala maybe, facilitated the barakah of saving that man's relationship with his children, right? And so don't ever let advice in our community go out of style. Don't let it go out of style. Just do it the right way. We need to do it the right way. Once we commit to doing advice the right way, we will see our relationships will not only maintain, but they'll get much better. They'll get much better. People now are afraid to give advice and they don't want to receive it. This is the worst situation we can find ourselves in. People are afraid because why? Oh, who am I to advise? If I do this, I'm going to be called judgmental, this and this. People are angry to receive. People don't know my story. They don't know this. This is the worst possible way to find ourselves. Until we can rectify the position of where we are, we're actually missing out on the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the hadith says. We have to search for this. We have to seek it. Begin by asking those around you who you trust, who you love, hey, can you give me some advice? And see how much benefit you find in that. May Allah ta'ala grant us tawfiq. May Allah ta'ala accept from us and make our hearts open to giving and receiving advice for His sake. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Let's do some questions and then we have Salatul Asha. Okay. What should you do if your parents are constantly reminding you of the burden you are to them as a woman in her late 20s, still living at home, not of choice? Okay. So, may Allah Ta'ala make this easy. You know, this is a very difficult scenario that a lot of people find themselves in. I want to be very clear about something. 30 and up is a halaqah for people that we live during different eras of like Islamic practice and Islamic, development. And part of the defining message of a lot of our growth as young Muslims or people who have accepted Islam in that era was the obedience to parents thing. It was like a big deal. First of all, there is no obedience to anyone besides Allah and His Messenger. So we actually don't use the word obedience to parents ever. We actually don't have obedient. The word obedience in Arabic is not used in the context of parents. This is something that Shaykh Abdul Nasser taught us. That word in English is never used for anyone outside of Allah and His Messenger in the Quran, right? Ta'ah. Ta'ah is not used for parents. The word that Allah uses is actually ihsan. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Do your best. Not like your fake best, but your absolute best, okay? Because obedience is something that only a perfect being can reserve. Like, if I say you have to obey me, the assumption in that statement is that I'm perfect. I'm never going to make a mistake, right? Because you have to obey me. But Allah, we know, is the only perfect being. So He deserves obedience. And by extension, His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? But anybody else outside of those two categories, there's no obedience. There is what? There is ihsan. There is doing your best. So that message was kind of really pushed a lot, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. And in that message, again, what I talked about in the beginning, because there was such a hyper focus on one side of the relationship, there was a deep neglect of the other side. And what that led to was a very dangerous power dynamic. Now, if you have a good relationship with your parents, please do not imagine things that are not real. A lot of people are like, well, my parents abused me. How? They got me BMW instead of a Mercedes. Be quiet, okay? That's not what we're talking about here. That's not trauma, okay? We're talking about, and even this question, like, I don't know the whole story, so I can't. And by the way, another thing for advice is like, it has to be like, there's got to be a lot of details and stuff. So I don't know what's going on here. I don't know the whole scenario, and I'm not talking about this, but I do want to use this question as a chance to address something, which is a lot of parents are going to be asked on the Day of Judgment about how they raise their kids. Yes, kids have to do their best for their parents. I get it. We know that. It's in the Quran. But it's almost as if some parents don't realize, like, they parent as if there can be no wrong. And I think that that's a really dangerous place for parents to be. And I say that as a young parent myself. I have to remind myself constantly that these children are not my slaves. They're my responsibility. They're my amana. Amana, like, I have to take care of them. And that means financially, physically, spiritually. I say this because it's almost as if sometimes you hear stories where the parents actually didn't care if their kids remained Muslim or not. It was more about the obedience and the culture. And then the kid leaves Islam and they're like, good riddance. No, that's not okay. We don't engage like that. That's not how we operate. Where did you ever see the Prophet ﷺ talk to children like that? Where? Or anybody for that matter. Find me the hadith. I would love to read it with you. So really, really important, and I want to just leave this here. It's very, very important for us to realize that there is that responsibility. Now, some of us are sitting here saying, okay, thank you. I would have loved to have heard this, like 25 years ago, or I wish my parents could hear this. This is not helping my scenario. Okay, I get it. But what I'm trying to do is validate you and let you know that, yes, sometimes the things that your parents may have done or said were not correct. And by the way, a lot of parents do come to realize that. And at some point, they do say, I was just trying my best. I didn't know better. We have to have mercy for people as well, right? We can't just take out a emotional cannon and just blast people away. No, we're human. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. We all make mistakes, okay? So this scenario, right, the idea of reminding somebody that they're a burden, etc. Again, I'm going to assume that these are not assumed words, but these are actually explicitly stated. Because it's dangerous to say, if they make me feel like a burden, but as opposed to, they actually do tell you you are a burden. Like that's crossing the line. Because sometimes we can assume that people mean things that they're not actually sending, right? So if a parent tells their, in this case, daughter, that you are a burden because you are living in your late 20s and you're still living at home, it seems to be that because maybe that they're not married, then this is something that's not right. Right? This is a form of emotional, I don't want to say abuse per se, but it's a form of emotional neglect, and the person is being treated, it's mistreatment, and the person needs to, I would recommend that you try to find something, a scenario where you can arbitrate with your parents about how they feel. If you can talk to them directly, that's good. If you can share, that's good. If they don't seem to be interested in that, then maybe try to utilize someone like a trusted family friend, an imam, etc., that can help navigate that conversation. Wallahu a'lam. Why do I feel guilty for choosing my own well-being, even when I know helping others would have caused me stress? So bismillah. So there, Islam, the beauty of the Islamic framework is that every ethic, every ideal that Allah tells us in the Quran or the Prophet ﷺ demonstrates for us in his Sunnah is always tied to these base principles, these base goals known as the maqasid of Sharia. What are the goals of Islam, of Sharia? One of those goals, the utmost of them, right, after preservation of faith, is preservation of your own life. And this includes also health, right? At a baseline that's acceptable, okay? So you can't say like, oh, it's part of my health to have a Maybach. Like that's not, But at a baseline, right, general health. For those who don't know what a Maybach is, may Allah bless you, right? May Allah bless you with endless wealth. Okay, so the question the person is asking is, why do I feel guilty for choosing myself, even when I know that I would have been caused stress for others? Well, let me give you two paths, okay? It's okay to be stressed out by helping others. And what I mean to say is, you don't have to be always comfortable all the time. Part of the price of being in a community and having friends is discomfort. Like if your friend is sick, it's going to cost you money to go and buy them food and cook them food and drop it off. And it might actually take away your whole evening. That's uncomfortable, right? That's stress. But that's the cost of being a friend. Would you rather be lonely? Like which one? So there's one side of this, which is what stress is stress that is functional, adaptable, appropriate stress or discomfort, okay, which is part of life. I mean, if you exercise, you're putting stress on your body every day. It's a good stress, okay? And then there's dysfunctional stress or stress that leads to dysfunction. And that, Islam says, you never sacrifice your own well-being for the sake of dysfunctionally incurring stress upon yourself. You never do that. You never give away all of your wealth to the point where you can't pay your bills. That's not encouraged in Islam. That's not. The Prophet ﷺ once told a companion who tried, there was a companion who tried, and he said, don't do that. You need some money, right? So we learn that if we're looking at this question, there's two different ways of reading it. Number one is, are you talking about like inconvenience, discomfort, maybe something not going according to plan? You know what? That's part of life. And if you want to have fulfillment, those moments of gratification, of being with others, of belonging to something, then yes, it might require that you wake up earlier than you wanted to, that you go to a restaurant that you didn't particularly like, that you stay up a little bit later, that you give the ride home even though you wanted to go straight home yourself. That's part of life, okay? And if you want to have friends, embrace the discomfort. You can't always make yourself happy. You're going to have to choose their happiness over yours. That's part of life. But if we're talking about truly dysfunctional stress or stress that leads to dysfunction, then yes, the answer is you should, of course, take care of your own faith and your own well-being over anything that causes that. May Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq. Inshallah, we're going to break now for Isha prayer. It's in 2 minutes, so if you'd like to head over and join us in the Musalla to pray Isha, then I would love to see you there. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah Ta'ala accept from us and make us those that embody all the characteristics of our beautiful Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.